You want to know what's coming next? Because they're not going to stop at Iran. Iran? Iran? I'm trying. In fact, they're not even going to stop just in the Middle East, but today, this video, we're going to focus on the Middle East. What comes next for the Middle East? First, let's define the sides and what they bring to the table. These guys all work together. They might seem in the news like they're being ambiguous. Don't do that in my airspace. They're working for each other's interests. No one country bends over to all the interests of just one country, although it seems that way, because they are the face of all of the oppression, because it's what they bring to the table. When you understand the system, it is much darker than that, because what they bring is weapons testing. They bring real-life intel and weapons testing for the United States weapons producers. The United States gives them money. They then purchase United States weapons to use in real-life conditions to provide intel on the threats, to provide intel on how to make the weapons better before they have to use them. Saudi, we know, they give oil. They want to get oil out with less pirates. They want to pay less prices for oil. They have the information on the pirates because they have made themselves relevant through the profits of war. But they're not the only ones. They fund it. They're aware of this system. They fuel it. They're aware of this system. This is an allyship. They're all at guilt. Blaming it on just one country is an injustice to every single victim of this triad of power. And it's not just them, there's other allies as well. These are just the three main ones that we're going to be talking about. They also benefit from the intel because they are fighting against the Houthis and the Iranians as far as getting their oil out at a cheap rate. Every time that I say this, people tell me Saudi has no reason to do what I'm saying that they're going to do. You need to understand Nash equilibrium, because previously, up till recently, Saudi has had no reason to do what I'm saying that they're going to do. But every day their Nash equilibrium changes to lean more in the favor of attack, colonialism, seizing resources, etc. Because we are coming up on climate change and Saudi is widely affected. In fact, the whole Middle East, North African region, everyone who has been sustaining the world for so long by giving resources for so long at deep, deep discounts, they are the ones that are the most impacted. So Saudi actually now does have a reason to go seek outside resources. They're having true fiscal issues when it comes to funding their current plans. Also, what are their current plans? Vision 2030. This is Saudi's AI city. Similar rhetoric has been used for Gaza to say that we, Trump, the administration, Bibi, whoever, is going to create an AI city in Gaza. But Saudi has actually substantiated and is working towards this. Except they're running out of money. In fact, they're in such an extreme budget deficit right now that they've scaled back this Vision 2030, which was their main goal for quite some time. And they've switched into investing in energy and AI. All of this to say, whether through Vision 2030 or through restructuring into energy and AI centers, Saudi is restructuring how they gain wealth, which was previously through oil. Oil, right? Saudi has previously been selling oil that is obtained right here. And then you can either get it up here through the Iranian Strait of Hormuz choke point, or you can come down here, which is where most of it goes, through the Gulf of Aden, the Houthis choke point. This is how goods get around. This is how goods get into Europe. This is how goods get to the world. But climate change changes everything. It shifts power. It shifts who can live in certain regions, how much can be extracted realistically, what times of the day it can be extracted. But it also changes the need by supply and demand. Because not only is the area that Saudi is in, the North African and Middle Eastern region, not only are they more disproportionately displaced by this climate change, more highly affected by this climate change, they also are now competing with people who are gaining by climate change, which is the global north. Because these trade routes that get goods to the world have their own problems. Climate change, for one, that we talked about, but also pirates. And also, they're too long. They take too much oil in comparison to what we have opening, which is in the Arctic. The Arctic trade routes, which are already seasonally open on the Russian side, Russia has some sort of a financial control on here. They're able to require icebreaker escorts, things like that. So Russia is already asserting a level of dominance here, and they're able to do so up until the point that it melts. And then, once it melts, they actually also have an ability to assert a separate type of dominance up to the North Pole as they gain resources and the ability to mine those resources. Resources meaning oil. So that offsets that through supply and demand, Saudi's relevancy. In fact, it offsets through supply and demand everyone's relevancy in the Middle East, because everybody's relevancy is contingent on the fact that this region gets goods to the world. And some of the climate estimates for 2050, 2070, this one is one of the more severe estimates for 2070. Some of these are brutal. Like that's Saudi right there. And this is the areas of Africa that previously were the food givers. This is the basket of Africa. So if Saudi wants to maintain the control of the Middle East that they currently have, they are going to have to be looking at taking some sort of resource, power, something from somebody else. They're not going to have the same cards that they have always had. And also, if Saudi wants to continue that Vision 2030 with any insight in mind, they're not going to want to continue shipping the same amount that they're currently shipping. They're not going to want to continue the war that they currently have against the Houthis in this region. Or rather, they're likely to scale back or pause the war in Yemen until they then decide to end and finish the war in. And everyone wants to say Yemen is about it. I agree with you. I love the culture of Yemen, or not the culture, the about itness. I love the passion of Yemen. That's not me supporting a terror organization. That's me supporting the people, the passion that the people of Yemen have brought. This is not support. This is explanation. And also Saudi will finish it because they're going to want it to be safe as they build their infrastructure, their new stupid AI city thing. And so one might be looking for a new trade route or a repurposed old trade route going through the Strait of Hormuz, either up through Iran and there to the east, the east, or up into to the Mediterranean to get goods into. With climate change, with goals for Vision 2030, the Red Sea, I think that they're going to be shifting that. So I think that we can likely look for a trade route to be prioritized going through potentially even Iran itself, Iran itself, but definitely through the Strait of Hormuz to get goods up through Israel, Palestine area, and into the Mediterranean. As far as everywhere else in the Middle East, I do think that at some point in time there will be a free Palestine, and it will not be strategic land, and it will be at a time that the land is no longer relevant and no longer, well, it already is not easy to live on, but it will be even more difficult to live on at that point in time. It's a game. It's a way to distract people. People will think it's a win. It's not a win. I think there will be a free Kurdistan or very close to free Kurdistan. And I think just like every other time, it will be ripped away from them in the last moment. It is a game. They are being oppressed to the point that they have no choice but to be non-strategic. And currently they are being non-strategic. And ultimately it's going to end in them being essentially pawns, puppets, etc. of the West again, which has happened multiple times. But they're consistently oppressed down to the point that they have no choice but to rise up and protest. And those protests end up serving the interests of the West. And this can happen directly and like a literal involvement, or this can happen just by simply crashing the dollar and forcing them into a starvation and survival mode. This is human nature. We would be no different. But the rhetoric that we're going to hear ramping up is that they are very that they are basically the pawns of the West. But it will be because they have been fooled by the West. Again, it's a game. It will be a puppet of the West, a tool of the West, and a tool of Israel. And they will later be profited on and victimized by the Western allies as well. Because Turkey will quickly invade to protect their ability to use hydraulic hegemony and use water to apply geopolitical pressure in the region. But as with every time before, the lives of the Kurds is a risk that the Western allies are willing to take. In fact, wars involving the Kurds is something that the West is very likely to jump on board funding. It's profitable and it serves their goals. It helps their interest, which is to keep the Middle East fragmented and easy to restructure the power within, with the goal being to keep Iran as a fragmented state or to fragment it even further. There will be speak of various puppet governments. Pahlavi's name will be thrown around. We probably will hear that for a while. I don't know if he will actually be put in place because it's equally beneficial to keep him in place as it is to keep it fragmented, and it's more profitable to keep it fragmented. And also, Real and the West, United States, have made promises to literally everyone. Like, this is the Balfour Declaration 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. We're just repeating history, essentially. The same way that that the land of Palestine was promised to multiple people, the land of Iran has been promised to multiple people as well. Or the control of, the resources of, etc. trade routes will come up through here. Water scarcity, of course, going to run rampant in the region. Now, if the Kurds end up working with Israel, I think that they're going to be probably targeted by Turkey, especially as the movement grows. And I don't think that it would take all that long, less than a year for sure, for Turkey to choose to then invade the Kurdish region, the Kurdistan region. And people will probably say at that point it's about oil. It's kind of about oil a very little bit, but more than that, it will be about water. Because this is the water that Turkey currently uses to do hydraulic hegemony and to apply geopolitical pressure for the West throughout the region. Turkey is likely to become a bit of a wild card, actually, because while they're in NATO, they align with the West. They also have their foot in the door for BRICS. They have applied for BRICS. They also purchased weapons from Russia at one point in time and were sanctioned for it. They met with Trump earlier this year requesting for those sanctions to be lifted, requesting for fighter jets that they've been requesting for quite some time. And what they offer to the little allyship here is albeit smaller but still relevant. It is the geographic location, and it is also drones. Huge drone program. They supply drones to Ukraine in a war that is effectively distracting Russia from their gains of the Arctic trade route, their militarization of the Arctic trade route. Consider Turkey to be like the swing state of the Middle East, with Israel being definitely Western and Turkey being a bit more of a wild card. So, like, if BRICS is red and the West is blue, right? Israel is definitely blue. Turkey is like more blue, it's purple, but it's more blue than purple. Iran is more red in purple, right? So it's just various degrees of who they're aligning with. Iran tended to align more with Russia, whereas Turkey tends to align more with us, but both are wild cards. And then as far as the smaller countries like Lebanon and even some of the larger ones like Syria, proxies, continued fragmentation as we chop up the Middle East, keep it fragmented and divided for the dollar and by the dollar. Even the wealthier, like Dubai, Oman, these places are also heavily impacted by climate change, but currently have money. They are funders of resource extraction, etc. down here. Land grabs, power grabs. And then those fragmented sides, like what we see in Sudan, is essentially the proxies by BRICS versus the proxies by the West. And that's been happening. Coming down to the Red Sea. Down in the Red Sea, I think this is where Saudi is going to start to assert most of their control. So Saudi will either through geopolitical partnerships or through proxy wars or straight up wars, we're not going to see them stopping with Yemen because Yemen stays somewhat livable, while as Saudi is much less livable. Not fully inhabitable, but getting there. Or rather, they're not going to stop wanting that land, wanting to clear the land for their use. They will at some point slow down or stop the destruction because they're going to have to if they want the land. Sudan, this is a lot of food has previously been grown here, and there are regions here that are going to continue to be able to grow food. So I think that they're going to try to take control of Sudan, as we're seeing right now. We've got two separate proxies over here that are funding this double-sided war in Sudan. Egypt already aligning with BRICS. Most of these countries are aligning with BRICS. That's why I say that we're shifting into a more bipolar world, because the majority of these countries are starting to align more with the Russia, China, India bloc. As is smart, because as we mentioned, Russia is gaining so much through the Arctic. They are actively de-dollarizing. They are in their hemisphere, etc. It's not anti-American. It's anti-starving their own people. It's very small, but down here you have Eritrea. That's a slave state. Eritrea, I never know how to pronounce these things. That's a slave state. I think that they are going to probably be used to lease labor for these goals. Oh, there we go. Okay. So Eritrea, right down here. And then we've got Ethiopia previously grows food because they have access to that river in Sudan, but they are going to be facing significant water scarcity as they currently are. And finally, Somalia, or as some countries, Bibi is calling it Somaliland, at least the area he wants, which is this piece, which is, of course, right there on the Gulf. Choke point. So we'll likely see a free Somaliland as well. Hypocritical as hell. So that is my analysis of what I think is going to happen in the Middle East in the next coming years. Basically the Balfour Declaration. Bell 5 Declaration, Bell 6 Declaration. We're repeating history. Follow me, share, let me know what you think.